Nick, what are Euro games? And also, what is theme?
How do you even define a Euro game anymore?
What's up, everybody? I'm Mike.
I'm Nick.
We are the brothers Murph, and we are going to try to define what a Euro game is, even though it's just sort of games with not as many dice.
The general concept of a Euro game is a game that focuses on mechanics over theme, and with all of these,
I would still strategy over luck. That's why we can't agree.
And that's the thing. Euro games nowadays, people always ask, like, what's a Euro game? At this point, the line between Euro game and other guys is very, very blurred. Which is a good thing. There's a lot more hybrid games. There are definitely some games that are very like, this is just a textbook Euro game. But nonetheless, the term is kind of muddy at this point.
Indeed.
But that's okay. But it tends to be a game that like prioritizes luck, strategy over luck, and mechanics over theme. That's the general term.
That's how we've come to understand it.
There are some really good thematic Euros out there.
Games that take their theming and integrate it well so that's intuitive toward the mechanisms of what you're doing, like makes sense for the theme, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Indeed, we're supposed to be talking about not just themes that we like on Euro games, but games where the mechanics, you really feel like you're doing or taking part in whatever the theme is. And so we love theme, we love thematic Euro games. They're probably my favorite. If I had to pick one kind of game that I love the most, it'd be thematic Euro games.
Far and away the best.
Love them, love them, love them. So these are our top 10 thematic Euro games, but over on our Patreon, we're gonna have 10 more games that integrate their theme very, very well. We really love those thematic Euro games. So check out our Patreon today if you got a couple extra bucks and you would like to. And like this video as well. Subscribe if you haven't, and let's get into it, huh?
Let's get to number 10.
Number 10 was the game that made me realize that theme could make sense in a game. And I guess this was, the number 10 is Suburbia. And when we first played Suburbia, in Suburbia, you're building out a sub, you're playing out these hexagonal tiles, and the hexagonal tile will be like a fast food restaurant, a school, an office building and stuff. But on the tiles, they'll be better or worse depending on basically what's around them or how many of those things are in your city. And every single tile in Suburbia is very, very thematic. If you have a fast food restaurant, you want it to be next to other green tiles, which are residential tiles, because who's eating at fast food places? A lot of like families and people in residence. You want the freeways next to like office buildings, because who's going to office buildings? People who are usually commuting to work.
Yeah.
You don't want airports next to like housing areas, right?
You don't want a graveyard next to a school. It bums people out.
It bums kids out to see so many people dying.
Exactly. So this is one that like every single hex when it goes down, and it's a good way to like a lot of tile placement games, it has to do with adjacency. What this next to this is good, this next to that is bad. But they do such a good job of like every time you read the tile, you're like, that does make sense. I wouldn't want an airport there. Or if I have a fine dining restaurant, then everyone around me, they also have a fine dining restaurant. Well, now it's less valuable because they have more options. I want people to go to my restaurant. So it makes sense.
Yes, there's so many things. Every single tile makes perfect sense in terms of what it gives you. It makes perfect sense. And like I was going back to what I was talking about, this was the first game ever that we played where we were like, oh, the theme makes sense. Like the theme, like terms like Settlers Catan, all these like, oh, you're getting wood, you're trading for sheep, all right, whatever. It's just, just very, very dry, themeless stuff.
Sure.
This one was like, oh no, this makes sense that you would want, this school is worth, like if you have an elementary school, it's worth this much. But you have an elementary school and a middle school, they're both worth more. And then if you have like a high school, it's worth even more because you would want all the schools in your city.
Have a solid education system.
It'd be weird if you're like, hey, we only got to middle school, then you got to go somewhere else to go to high school. And so there's all these, everything makes sense. And every single time we play, we're like, oh, that's cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And to this day, I love that about Suburbia. I think it's one of the coolest things, and it's so darn thematic.
Yeah, everything makes sense. You can, it helps you drive that strategy. I want to have a bunch of blue, which are like business things. Well, let me get this like office supplier because like they're gonna make my blues better because they're providing the staplers for those. It's like all those things make sense. So it makes it easier to develop that strategy. So Suburbia is one that like
so cool.
has never disappointed. It was my initial hook when you explained it to me of like why we should play it. I got super excited for it, and it's the thing that's kind of carried us through to getting a collector's edition of this game. Was like that theme, the way it works in the game is just really solid. So that's number 10, Suburbia.
Let's get number 9. Number 9's got one of the cooler themes.
It's definitely one of the cooler themes. You're playing as weather or controlling weather. Are we a god in this game? This is Petrichor.
I'm a cloud. Yeah, are we gods? I don't know.
Sort of. I mean, this is a game, it's sort of an area control game using water. They have all these cool glass beads, and you are putting water down onto certain tiles, which represent crops, and they need a certain amount of water to then grow and become better crops. And you kind of want to have you want to have contributed
it's an area control
the
game,
most
ultimately,
water to that crop's like growing in order to score the most points. So what's really fun is that like there's like these little touches of theming in the game, other than like it looks cool. You put stuff into clouds, the rain. When it rains, you dump it out of the cloud disappears off the board, and now there's just water on the ground because that cloud has rained out its water.
Yeah.
If you combine clouds, they become thunder clouds. If they become oversaturated, they just rain out on their own because it's just the cloud couldn't possibly handle
couldn't do it.
more water. You can use wind effects to blow the water from the ground over to another field.
Yeah.
All sorts of like little,
around,
little things like that are really just like, again, as you're playing, you almost kind of notice right after the fact, like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, like, of course the cloud goes away and then there's no cloud left in the sky. The water's in the ground.
And then all the different crops take certain amounts of water depending on what they are, which is true in real life. And, and it's just a cool one. It's a cool theme in general. You are kind of weather. Yeah. And then it's like, oh yeah, now this cloud has too much water in it. So it would then rain to, because it gets clouds have a saturation point, and so it's just such a cool concept and such a cool theme that's pretty well integrated. I honestly wish we liked the game a little bit more. We both.
I just don't think we played it at the right player.
Yeah,
count.
it's like
not a two-player.
It's not the best two-player game, but it is a fun game. But we both, every time we play, we're always like, I kind of wish I liked this game a little bit more than I do because the theme is so cool, but it is really well integrated into the game.
It's hard to find a cooler game than Petrichor.
Yeah,
it's just really neat.
It's just rad. Yeah, and there's a bunch of expansions which we haven't tried yet.
Need to try them.
Which are very, very cool as well. But yeah, it's super cool game. And again, the theme is really well integrated. And again, just like weather, man, that's cool.
It's freaking awesome is what it is. That's Petrichor number 9. Play as the rain itself.
Indeed. Let's get number 8.
Number 8's all about stacking people super duper high, and if you don't have good skills, you won't do very good. This is Castel.
Yeah, it is Castel.
It's a game that we were thinking about, like, you know what? This makes sense. If I'm making a human pyramid, which this game is literally about making human pyramids, if I don't have good balance or strength, I'm not going to be able to build a very sweet pyramid. But if you have those things, then you can start to, build some pretty impressive human towers.
Yeah, it's cool. It's a game about Castellers, which is in the Catalonia area of France, where they build those big human pyramids. Spain, thank you. Where they build those big human pyramids, and the game is based around that. And yeah, it's like you're going around to these different regions and you can pick up new Castellers. So you're like, hey, come join our troop.
People to your troop.
Very, very cool and thematic. You can train, as Mikey was saying. You can train to get better at balance. You can train to get better at strength, get a bigger base so you can be stronger and go higher up. All these different things. You're going around and putting on like little shows. Yeah. And then on top of that, you're also going around and putting on big festivals.
Like big tournaments,
Big tournaments. But the thing I love about the game is it's tough to move around, and you're going around this part of Spain, and it's like you're here for this festival, and the next round, the festival's over here. You will not be able to get to that. So even the movement is thematic. It's like you can't just fly over there. Yeah. You have to move over there, and it's going to be hard, and you can spend some extra actions to move farther, but a lot of parts of the game, you just have to choose, like, okay, I'm just not going to go for that festival. They want to see this specific thing. I'm not particularly good at that specific thing anyway. So I'm going to go over here and spend my time over here, train up and get ready for this festival.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like you're trying to kind of, you have perfect information. You know where performance are going to happen, what you need to be able to perform, and you're trying to make sure that your troop is like going to be good for that performance, and then make sure you're in that location. In the meantime, let me do some of these like little smaller local performances and kind of skill showcases to get myself some points. There's just a lot of things that like, oh, it makes sense. Like I'm going to try to aim here because I have that knowledge of where I need to go and when, and I can try to map out my route and get the right Castellers for my troop, and it makes sense thematically and then what you're doing mechanically.
Even the end game to me is kind of thematic because throughout the game you're putting on these festivals and you're scoring points, but at the end of it, basically you only score more points if you essentially outdid your best festival.
Yeah, your single high score is the only thing that matters.
Yes, exactly. So at the end of the game, your score starts there, wherever your best festival was. And so it's cool because like, what do you get remembered for? Your best thing you did all year,
they put
right?
Those crazy
People
this
immediately forget about that last week over here in Barcelona. You totally fell and someone broke their hip, And so no one cares because over at this place, you did this whole big thing. And so it's just so thematic, so cool. One of the most underrated games on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Game came and went real fast, and we, as you've heard us talk about it many times, have never quite gotten over that
We'll
fact.
evangelize
It's
this game
such a good
forever.
game. Castel is number 8. It's about stacking people. It's real. It happens in real life. It's dope. It's crazy. It's number 8.
You kind of turned me around on this when you first suggested the list. I kind of was like, Is it that thematic? And you made a lot of very good points for this.
Did I? It's Lost Ruins of Arnok, which is one that it falls into the category of sneakily thematic, which I think is an important category. Yes. Sneakily thematic. Because this game, like most games that we like, because we are Euro game type of people, the theme is pasted on. We get it. It's just put on with some paste. All right? With Lost Ruins of Arnok, though, they put sneaky ways, sort of as, it's more about the flow of the game, that shows its theming in the mechanisms. Because this is a game that is straight up resource conversion. Yeah. That's all you're doing. You're trading a scroll in for an arrowhead.
I played it 2 days ago.
Yeah, and you're trading all these things in to move up this research track and stuff. But what's really cool is the layout of the board and the sort of cadence as the game goes on. Yeah. Because you have different action spaces, which are just places to go get resources. Now, the ones that you started with at the start of the game are campsites. And they're, if you notice, they're right there on the beach. Why? Because you took a boat over and you've landed on the beach. It's the first place you are. It's right on the beach.
It's easiest to get to.
It's easiest to get to. So you only, there's travel costs in the game and there's boots. Why? Because you're already there. You don't have to go very far. Yeah. But then you can discover dig sites. And what you have to do with that is turn in compasses because you're having to go around and traverse the jungle and find these places. So to discover it, you have to pay a bunch of compasses. That's awesome. Yeah. Now, if I want to go there, I might need to take a boat or I might need to take a Jeep or a plane in because I'm going further out into the field, further away from civilization. I'm like, that makes sense. If I want one of those secondary dig sites, it takes 6 compasses because you're really going deep into the cut then.
You need 2 boats or 2 trucks.
You know what I mean? It's like, that makes sense. And then also with the card market at the top of the board, in the first round, you have 4 items available at all times to purchase, and at any time you have 1 artifact that you can acquire. Each round, you move this little moon staff, which tracks the game, but it also means that you have fewer and fewer items as the game goes and more access to artifacts. Why? You're getting further and further away from the city. So you don't have as many access to the commodities and things we need from the city, but you're finding more and more stuff as you dig it up. So there's all these things that reinforce the theme in something that is ultimately just a kind of a mechanically robust type Euro game. And I just love so much.
It is.
That if you stop and think about it for a second, you're like, oh, that's so cool. Like we're way out here in the field. So I don't have some dude that can drive me over here by a donkey. It's like I'm in the wild. Yeah. And it's just so cool.
It's very good. No, you're not wrong. It's like it really is the exploration part and the worker placement part of that is really, really cool and thematic. Yeah. It all of it makes sense, right? All of it makes sense. So. Yeah, it's very cool. And I mean, even the resource conversion, a lot of it, it's like, oh, you have an assistant. This assistant found this thing, so now you get arrowhead. And you can turn those arrowheads and this kind of stuff to move the research track because you were able to research them. The research track part's slightly less thematic, but it's just like, even then the resource conversion makes sense in that world.
And
I
like that, like really you get most of your points by ascending that research track. And so it just reinforces the theme of like, our ultimate goal here is the pursuit of knowledge and to learn. So the research track is how we do that.
Yeah,
so even that, while pretty abstract, it makes sense for the theme.
Yeah, Lost Ruins of Arnok is a great game. I just played it the other day, and I was just like,
it's so beautiful.
I was like, I forgot how much. It'd been a little while for me, and I was like, God, that's right. I forgot how much I freaking love this game. Awesome. Yeah, Lost Ruins of Arnok's number 7. It's really, really fun. And again, it's kind of sneakily thematic. There'll be another sneakily thematic game coming up here, but let's get to number 6. Number 6, we just got, and we were just raving the whole time.
It kind of inspired us to do this list, actually.
It kind of did, actually. We were raving the whole time about how thematic it was, and that is Atiwa. So Atiwa is the new Uwe Rosenberg game. We love it so much. And it's got, just in general, let's say it was pasted on, still one of the coolest themes. This is a game where you are in Ghana, and you are essentially kind of housing and just supporting the fruit bat population of the region.
Yes. And learning that they are this asset for overall, like you're trying to grow your, the kind of infrastructure of your people,
and
but like these bats are an asset, not a hindrance.
Exactly. And so, because these fruit bats eat fruit and then poop out the seeds is what they do. And then that makes trees grow. That's how trees spread. That's how they spread their seed. That's the whole point of fruit, is for animals to eat them and then excrete their seeds out there. That's how trees pass on their genes, right? Yep. And so it's this whole thing, but in this area, they were getting rid of all these fruit bats because they were kind of seen as like essentially like pests.
They're a little scary, you know. Yeah, they fly weird. If they flew in a straight line, we wouldn't have a problem, but they're dodgy.
And then they realized that, no, this is really, really important. So then they started to really support fruit bats and kind of have them inside their house. Uwe Rosenberg, he literally wrote an entire book on this. He loved this theme so much. So we love the theme. We finally got to play it, and it really is thematically integrated into the game.
Yeah.
Because everything you're doing is really makes sense for this. You're constantly have all your kind of resources on your main board, and then you're putting them into your tableau where you're getting these different village cards, and you're also getting these different terrain cards. And the villages where you'll kind of put the different families. You want a bunch of families to kind of come into your town. And then you can train those families kind of in the way of the fruit bat. And then they can start housing fruit bats inside their houses, which is super cool. And then you have your board where you're constantly pulling stuff off of your board and putting it onto your tableau. But then a lot of times they're kind of constantly going back. So you have like wild animals, and you put it on your board, but then you can have your families, because you got to feed your people because it's an Uwe game, eat wild animals, and then they'll go back to your board, but then they come back in, and it's just kind of natural hunting and gathering, all kind of stuff. But the thing is at the end of every round, there's an income phase, and depending on what's off of this board, you're going to get certain things. So if you have a certain amount of wild animals, that is going to allow you to put another tree down there for the same reason as the fruit bats. They eat fruit, poop out the seeds.
Around doing their
and so
business.
boom, if you have enough wild animals into your area, you will get to grow a tree. If you have trees, you get to put out fruit. If you have fruit, you get to put out
bats.
You attract bats. And then it's so cool. And then on top of that, your bats can kind of go off and forage in the night.
Yeah, so what you can do is there's this like additional action.
Like additional bat action.
There's a bat action, right? You get to go Batman style. There's 3 actions in a round, but for every action you do, you can do a bat action.
I am the night.
Yeah,
I fly.
I am vengeance. They're like, did that bat speak? What's going on? You can turn in 3 bats and a fruit, and then the bats go to this, like, you have a little sidecar to cave.
Little night bar.
Little bat cave. And then you will put those bats over there, and then you can plant a tree. So that is representing the bats flying around, eating the fruit, and then trees kind of populate. So you can do that in addition to your normal actions to really help. And then once you get food and gold in particular, that'll allow you to put out your kind of I'd say your villages. There's settlements, towns, villages.
Yeah.
Those
Where
will give your
people
big,
can go,
where your people can go. So that's your society flourishing because of this kind of balance with nature.
But even then, when you do put out one of those kind of village tiles, you then have to turn in gold, and you have to turn in a bunch of trees because you're having to clear out some trees.
You're cutting down the wood to build the
town.
So
there's this constant back and forth between like
the ebb and
humanity
flow.
and like the environment, and trying to balance that. And it's just really cool. Yeah, in that kind of night phase with the bats, because every time you place a worker, that's considered like a day. So after you do your action, you can have your bats go on a night phase because that's night. They're nocturnal. They go out, they eat fruit, they poop out seeds, and trees grow.
Right.
It's just really cool and really well thematically integrated.
Yeah, it feels really neat. The terrain cards themselves are awesome because they're all different.
And they all make sense.
Yeah, there's one, like Nick found one that has like most of the each has like 9 spaces, and most of the spaces were like this cave structure. So what can you put in those? Bats. They go in the caves.
Yeah.
There's another one that's a very kind of foresty thing. You can put a lot more trees on there than you can, animals or something like that. Occasionally you come across one that can actually house a family.
Yeah.
They're out in the bush and stuff, but like they can do it, So I love that when you look at that, the name of the card and kind of what types of things you can put on there. I'm like, that makes sense. The art really makes sense. There's one that's a bunch of sheer cliffs, and it's like, it can't really house much
You can't
in
house
terms of
goats.
Yeah, goats can go in there. Why? Because they'll stand on the edge of the cliff like that. We see them on the Hoover Dam and things. I'm like, all those things are like, dude, that makes sense. That's how goats work. That's how goat physics are. It does so many things like that. We were really blown away by this one, especially for like an Uwe Rosenberg game where Uwe has theming
and does do a lot of research on his games, obviously.
Absolutely, but it's mostly like, I'd say mostly he sticks to the farm so much.
Yeah.
And this one, he sort of are, but this one, it just feels more different and feels even more thematically like integrated into the mechanisms versus like a lovely setting for a game. Atiwa does a great job. So that's number 6. We've talked about it quite a bit. We're very excited. If you couldn't tell, it's great.
It's very fun. Let's get number 5. Number 5 also has poop in it.
It does.
We're
We're in the poop section of the top 10 right now.
That's a mechanism in this game.
It is. This is Dungeon Pets.
Indeed.
We've talked about this many times. We've talked about how the poop for me was a great hook in because Nick was, this early in our board gaming days, Nick's like, there's a game where you're raising monsters and they poop and stuff. I was like, show me right now. And then we played a game for us at the time that was quite heavy. And now we're, makes sense.
And I would say
It's a
this is the
worker
game that
placement
probably made us fall in love with thematic Euros because
100%.
this is a game, as Mikey said, where you are raising monster pets. It's kind of
like
a
a pet
sequel ish to dungeon lords.
Yep.
Where now dungeon lords are coming into town and you have a little pet shop and you're raising little
selling
monster
pets to people.
And you're selling off these pets to these dungeon lords, but the dungeon lords want specific things. They might want like super aggressive pets. They might want a pet that poops a lot. If they're like a farmer, they need that manure.
All the pets are these weird little monsters.
They're really cute little monsters, but everything you're doing in this game is based on the theme.
It's based on the needs of the pets themselves.
Yes,
When
and
you
the needs of your shop.
Yeah, when you recruit a pet and stuff, they're going to have basically a certain amount of cards that you're going to have to play on them of different suits. Red cards are going to most likely have these kind of teeth on them, which means they're very aggressive. Purple ones will typically have magic. Yellow means they're very playful, need someone to play with, and green means they eat a lot. So based on this monster's needs, I need to have an enclosure for them that's going to suit their needs as best as possible.
Yeah.
And I need to make sure that I get food for them, or I have workers left behind to play with the monsters and keep them happy. So it all, like all the types of spaces you can go to, you're going to go there based on the immediate needs of the pets that you have that you're trying to raise, because a big thing in this game is like you don't want them to be unhappy or suffering at all.
That's
You want
horrible.
them happy and healthy and stuff, and to put on these showcases and be able to show off all of their traits and things like that, but you need to have the proper equipment.
Yeah.
So certain enclosures are really good at dealing with like physically aggressive animals or magical animals, or there's one that has like a play set in it. So you have one kind of free amount of play because like they can keep themselves entertained. So now I don't have to use many of my workers to do that. So everything kind of serves the happiness of those pets, which is really, really fun. It helps you, again, kind of drive your strategy, because I can see a lot of red cards. Okay, they're an angry pet. All right, let me get this other, add on to my cage that's going to be like really, kind of cool and help keep me safe.
And the whole worker placement board is, again, just you out getting stuff. You're sending
you're
your
market.
imps out into town, your little imp fam members, and they're picking up cages. If you want to go pick up a cage, you have to send at least 2 imps because they both have to help carry the
that's
cage.
heavy.
Your pets can escape and you can stop them, but then those imps that stop them get sent to the hospital. So you have to go get them. You can go like rig the contest. It's just like every single spot on the worker placement board makes total sense for what you're doing.
back into that theme.
And the whole thing just makes this big theme. It's smorgasbord. It just works so well. And on top of that, it's a pretty heavy game. And it's just like, it's really, really fun, but it's one of the most thematic games that we ever played and one of the best thematically integrated games we ever played. It's just so much fun. And that's Dungeon Pets number 5.
Number 4 is all about drinking and making that drink. This is viticulture.
It is true.
This is one that for us, we really enjoy the theme because, and we always talk about this, the theme and how you get to the point of making points.
It's very linearly thematic.
Linear and makes sense. Like if I want to make this wine, I need to have grapes in a field. Let me go get some grapes. First, let me plant them. Second, let me harvest that field. Third, let me make some wine. 4, and let me sell it. 5. Boom, 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 boom. It all makes sense and goes through. And so the things that you're kind of doing in the game to get to that point where you can sell wine and everything and make those orders all make sense. Like I can generally, I'm not, I haven't been a very successful gardener in life, but I understand the concepts of how I can get a product out of the ground and I need to plant it and do that. In the game, it just follows that kind of sensible line, and then it has touches of themes elsewhere. One thing that's great, at the end of the round, your wine ages. Well, that then it becomes more valuable. It's like, well, that's real life. That's exactly how that works. That's awesome. I love that you can get a tasting room as part of your vineyard because you're running your own vineyard. And if you have wine in your cellar, when you do a tour, you get a victory point because you're doing a sampling of wine. I'm like, that makes sense. And if I don't have wine to sample, well, why would I get rewarded for that? So there's all sorts of touches like that.
If you want a whole bunch of different wines, especially expensive wines, you need to upgrade your cellars. If you want this, you need to upgrade this. You have visitors you can constantly get. You're like, oh, this visitor allows me to break the rule because they're like this traveling sommelier or whatever. And now I get to do this thing when I play this card. Every little bit of this game is honestly very, very thematic, and especially like, again, how linearly thematic it is, where it's like you get grape cards, you plant them, you then harvest them, you squish them into juice, that you turn that juice into wine, and then you let that wine age and you fulfill this wine order. If you want to be able to do more stuff, you go and can hire more workers to work on your vineyard. It's just every single part of this game is really, really thematic, and I feel like it doesn't get the credit for being a very thematic Euro that it probably should, considering like every single word. If you want some extra cash, you can sell one of your fields, but now that field's gone. If you want to get that field back, you have to buy it back. All these different things, every part of that game just makes sense within the confines of that theme. You can go first by waking up early, but then you don't get as good of benefits. If you go last, if you choose to go last, your people got to sleep in longer, so then you're gonna get good bonuses. It's like every single part of the game makes sense within the confines of that theme. And it's my favorite game on top of that, which helps, but like thematically, it's incredibly good.
Yeah, that theme is what really sucked us in because like we're not drinkers, but it's really fun to run a vineyard. And this game really feels like you're running a vineyard and all the stuff you have to kind of track with that. And it's just one that, again, most of these games on this list are things that pulled us into the hobby early, and the theme is what got us there. Yeah. It's like, there's a reason we tried it, you know? There's a reason why we didn't try Castles of Burgundy, which is a fine enough theme, but we didn't try that game for years after we were playing board games because the theme didn't really pull us in. This one did.
Yeah, it's very, very cool. That's number 4, viticulture. Let's go ahead and get number 3.
Number 3 is the most sneakily thematic game of all time, and I love it so much. This is Stone Age. Yeah. This is a worker placement game.
You're a big advocate for how thematic this game is.
Because it makes so much sense.
It does.
It's so dope. So this is a game that I always think of as sneakily thematic because ultimately you have a pool of workers and you're assigning little groups to different action spaces and then rolling some dice and producing resources to turn in to build buildings or buy cards and stuff like that. All things that seemingly are just sort of like random worker placement-y things, and they are. But one thing that's really cool is if you think about what we're doing in the era that this game is set in, the Stone Age, it's early days of like technology and stuff like that, and tools and agriculture. And in the beginning of the game, mostly what we're worried about is making sure we keep our people fed. And so when you go to an action spot, you can assign as many workers there as you want for the most part. There's limits, but you can put like 4 or 5 workers if you want. For every worker you put onto a spot, if you're going to go to the fields to hunt, for example, you get to roll that many dice. If I roll more dice, I have a better chance at having a really high die roll, which then gets divided by 2 and I get that much food. And it makes sense. Like if I have more people out on the hunt and gathering, I'm probably going to get more stuff.
Yeah, probably.
If it's just one person out there in the field, you might not get anything. That makes sense to me. So it's like having more people on the job increases your odds of a success.
Yeah.
There's different types of goods like wood and brick and stone and gold, and they are harder and harder to find. The way I always explain it is like, it's pretty easy to be walking through the woods and find a stick. It's just there on the ground, or you break it off a tree. I have never encountered gold just by walking in the thing. You got to do a whole bunch of stuff. You got to pan for it. You got to dig it out. You got to do all these things. It's harder to get gold out of the earth than a stick. So you need more people. You need investment of stuff. You can work on your agriculture and move yourself up an agriculture track. So every round you're producing just inherently a certain amount of food. So that means I need to use less of my energy, my time, my population on hunting and gathering, and I can instead work on getting gold or stone, these harder to obtain goods, because I have more kind of safety and security. If things are good enough, I might extend my family and become bigger. Yeah. It's more mouths to feed, but I'm kind of good on the food. There's these little tool tokens you can get, which you can tap to just add to your dice roll. Well, that makes sense. If you have tools, you're going to do a better job doing this thing. Yeah. All those things to me, I'm like, dude, this is so cool.
Well, you can also go the agriculture track, which means then you're going to have a base amount of food because you're essentially farming. You're not having to go look for your food. At the very beginning of the game, you have to spend most of your time looking for food.
You don't want to starve.
Whereas by the end of the game, you're basically not having to look for food at all because your agriculture has gotten so good. Yeah. It really is thematic.
Yeah, it all makes sense and stuff, and you're building buildings and stuff. And that's kind of the most abstract part. Turn in like these types of resources to build this building, and I'm like, all right, that doesn't make so much sense. But you are building buildings, which is like shelter and stuff like that. But everything up until that, like, to me, just makes so much sense. And I can't get over it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a great kind of worker placement game to introduce to people because you can explain it from a thematic point of view. And I think that, at least for me, would help me get into like, this is how the game works, because it makes sense. If you have tools, you will do better. That's how life works. We need tools, you know? So Stone Age number 3, sneakily thematic-like. Indeed. It's so good.
Let's get number 2. Number 2 is one of my favorite games. A game I feel like we evangelized for quite a bit as well, and this is the Prodigals Club. So the Prodigals Club is a kind of a sequel to Last Will, which is also a very thematic Euro game. Last Will is. Prodigals, Last Will, you were trying to lose all your money. In the Prodigals Club, you're trying to lose all your money, lose all your friends, and lose an election. It's a weird theme, I'm not gonna lie, but it's very fun. It's very fun because you're just trying to be a big old jerk and just a generally bad person.
You want to be the worst, yeah.
You're trying to be the worst. But this is a very tight, tough, pretty heavy Euro game, especially after playing Last Will recently. I'm like, oh, Last Will is significantly lighter than Prodigals Club is. Yeah. But everything you're doing in this game makes sense for those 3 things. And you do have those 3 kinds of scores. You'll have, again, your friends, your kind of social score, your election score, and then your money score. And you want all three of those to be as low as possible because, again, you're trying to lose all these things. Whichever one of those is the highest, and that's bad, that's going to be your score for the game. So this is also one of those games where you have to do everything.
Yep.
And you have to do everything as equally as possible. It's very difficult.
Yeah, you can't let one slide.
No, but the game is just so fun because you're just like this kind of rich D-bag, and you're just like sending out your errand
You're
boys.
an eccentric.
And you're going around town and you're just being horrible. And you're just kind of like, I'm going to buy this mansion for a ton of money and then sell it for super cheap. And I'm going to go buy this really expensive dog and basically just give it away. And then, then I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go to a restaurant and be like super loud and rude and just like piss off a bunch of my friends because I'm not being like proper and stuff.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go to like the town square and just like spew a bunch of like, I don't know, Marxist, communist stuff and just like piss a bunch of people up.
Yeah, whatever makes people the most mad.
Exactly. And so that's what you're doing. But every spot you're going to is going to allow you to do these things. And then you're also getting cards, and all these cards correspond to usually one of the three different regions of the board.
Yeah.
And then and then again, the cards are just very thematic where like, again, you're like bringing your horse to dinner. So that costs a lot more money because like,
Horses eat.
they're like, hey, if you want to bring your horse in here, man, you have to pay us some more money. You got to get some hay
like
here.
to eat.
Exactly. And so it's very thematic, very, very fun.
Yeah, the art's fun and funny, and you're just getting wasted in places and stuff. But it's a fun theme to embrace because like, no one really wants to be a bad person in real life, but it's a safe space to just kind of be the worst while not hurting anybody. No. You're hurting yourself. This game should be subtitled Why We All Need Therapy, because
more or less.
We wouldn't self-sabotage like this if we were in therapy. We should all be in therapy. So Proggles Club does a great job of just, again, with the art and the names of cards and stuff that you're playing down, the kind of event cards that you can do. It's just it's hilarious. Like it makes you laugh every single time.
Yeah.
Because it's just like bananas what you're doing. But it masks an ultimately very crunchy, tight resource game where you are trying to eke out as much as you can out of every round because you don't have a ton of time. Vladimir Suki makes games where you're under pressure of time constantly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of stressful, but then it makes you laugh because you're like, I'm stressing out over how do I just ruin my reputation, and it's just like so weird, and
it's
funny,
so weird.
But you're doing all the opposite, like you said. You're gonna buy something for way too much, sell it for way too little because that nets you the worst amount of return.
Yeah,
you lose as much money as possible, stuff like that. It's just a hoot.
It's very fun.
It's so fun and funny. The way that you get to the losing all your points, essentially.
Yeah, it's very silly and very fun. That is Prodigals Club number 2. Let's get into number 1. Vladimir Suki, man.
Knows how to do it. Knows how to put some theme into, along with Ross Arnold in this one, into a game. This is Woodcraft.
Indeed, by Vladimir Suki and Ross Arnold. This is a game
another new one that we're like
very into right now. Yeah, it's Woodcraft is very thematic. This is a game where you are building wood stuff. You're maybe wood people. It's kind of confusing.
That part of the theme is unclear. I think we are
If
wooden
not,
people.
you're people who have done a lot of mushrooms because you're just like, all of you are very wide-eyed.
Seen the heart of the forest.
But no, this is a game where you are getting, there's every 3 different colors of dice. You have green dice, yellow dice, and brown dice. And those are kind of different kinds of wood.
The rarity, the rarest wood.
Yeah, like cheaper wood is green, then yellow's kind of mid, and then you have like your rich mahogany, the dark brown dice, which are the best ones. And everything you're doing in this game is super thematic. You're getting these dice, and you can take these dice, and you have tools in your little wood shop. You have a saw, and so if you have a 6 die, you can saw that die essentially in half and then create 2 different dice. And that could be like a 4 and a 2. You can basically, as long as it equals to 6, you can do that. You can take some scrap wood and just like put it on there, and then you get to increase the die value.
Glue pieces of wood together, which will take 2 different dice and combine their values to make 1 die.
Indeed, and it's just like this, everything you're doing, you can plant your dice, which are then you planting a tree, they can grow, and then you can like harvest them later. You plant them as a 1, they grow up to a pip value of 6, and then you can get them. And it's just like, it's just so cool in the way that it works. You're getting all these tools, getting tools gets you bonuses and stuff, but really the way the dice work and the dice mitigation is so cool and so thematic.
Yeah, this one gets the number 1 spot for us purely because it takes something that for so many games, again, Castle of Burgundy, this is not an anti-Castles of Burgundy list. We love castles, but you can use workers and you just mitigate the dice, but there's no thematic tie-in as to like, why does that change the die? It just does.
It does.
And this game takes something that you're ultimately doing arbitrary changing of values of dice
to fulfill contracts.
To fulfill a contract that happens to need a 1, 3, and a 5 of green, yellow, and brown. But the fact that you get to saw it in half and you split it into two, I've never seen something that does dice mitigation and tries to explain it thematically, truly thematically. It's like, well, a saw would cut a piece of wood, and maybe I cut it equally down the middle, or I cut it a little more over here and a little less over
and then
here.
you can cut that half too.
You can saw that part
cut that one
down
again right there. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm like, I think the fact they take something that could be so perfectly dry and really bring a lot of fun to it with the theming of the game, it's just like the ultimate flex.
Yeah.
For that. So it's just so cool to have a thematic reason that you get to split these dice or add 2 to the value of the dice because you're tacking on a piece of crap wood on the side or whatever to make a recorder that's going to need these bits of wood and a little bit of scrap and a little bit of glue, and like, well, that's what makes a recorder come together. It's one of the better, more fun, playful ways to do simple dice mitigation stuff.
Yeah, again, Vladimir Suki, and again, with Ross Honor on this one, but it tends to do like fun themes. Because again, it's a fun theme over a pretty heavy game, you know? And it's just like,
the money is blueberries. That's great. Why? Because you're in the forest and it's fantastic. I don't even care.
Yeah, Woodcraft is really, really good. It's again, one of the games recently, every time we play, we're like, God, this is so cool thematically. And like, why you're doing this is so cool, especially just, again, mostly around the dice. It's just like everything you're doing makes so much sense.
If you're buying something from a market and the die is a 4, it costs 4. If it's a 6, it costs 6. Why? Bigger piece of wood.
Yeah.
More to work with. If it's the brown, you have to pay $2 on top. Why? It's a more valuable, rarer type of wood. It costs more. If you go to Home Depot, if you get a piece of plywood or a piece of teak, different prices.
Yeah, it's
Makes
true.
sense.
It's true. It's very, very cool. It's really, really fun. We like it a lot. Yeah, Woodcraft's number 1. It's great. There's a lot of really great thematic Euro games. Again, we're going to have 10 more over on our Patreon, so make sure to check that out. Our patrons will be scrolling by right now as well. There's definitely a lot that we didn't get to talk about, and there's definitely going to be some games that we missed because we either haven't played enough or just haven't played it all. So down in the comments below, if we missed anything, let us know what games you think that are really thematic kind of Euro games, because I'm always looking for more.
Absolutely, yeah. So before you go and say, what about, it might be on our supplemental list. You got to be a patron to find out, though. So become a patron. See what I did there?
He did. Good job, Mike. Nonetheless, that's going to be it for us. Thank you so much for being here. For
Patreon.
God, we plugged it enough. Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate you. My name is Nick.
I'm Mike.
We're the Brothers Murph, and we'll see you later, everybody.
Patreon. Now, I'm not sure, but I think I probably mentioned Patreon one too many times, or simply enough times. Is there enough times? Who knows? Patreon, that's the point. We want to give a big thank you to our channel sponsors, Board Game Geek, Restoration Games, and Lucky Duck Games. Your support means so much to our Patreon community that we were just talking about. We really appreciate your support. And honestly, everyone who watches this video, gives this video a thumb up, and maybe subscribes, is hugely beneficial for us. So we thank you all so much for the support. Make sure you let us know in the comments below what your favorite thematic Euro games are.